Welcome to the Flymen Fishing Show, where we talk fly fishing, fly tying, and everything in between. I'm your host, Scotty Davis. Thanks for joining us today. We are talking with a familiar face, Keith Rose Ennis. He's the co-founder of Alphonse Fishing Lodge and basically the guy that every kid wants to be when they grow up. So thanks for talking to us today.
Yeah, great to be online with you guys.
Yeah, man. So how did the whole Alphonse Fishing Company get started? I know you were one of the co-founders of that.
So I've been in the Seychelles for the last sort of 22 years. It all started as a sort of a vacation job where I would go out and just as a youngster go out and go on board boats with guests and kind of show them how to fly fish and then get to fish at the same time. And that sort of progressed into various other businesses later. So after that, we obviously got involved in pioneering a lot of the outer islands, and that was after I had done quite a bit of extensive traveling. I worked in Russia, I worked in the UK, and I worked in Farlows of Pall Mall, and I actually did a few trips out to places like Clipperton and all those kind of places, and realized that actually, you know what is the point of traveling so much when we've got much better fly fishing so close by? So that basically led me on into the guiding game, and slowly, the weeks built, and it got to a stage where we at one stage we had various different liverboards in the Seychelles, and that went on for about 5 or 6 years. So then obviously the piracy came about, so that sort of stopped business altogether. When you're working on a liverboard and there's pirates around, you can't operate. So we kind of shut our business down, and we moved to a place called St. Brandon's, and did that for a little while before I decided that I was going to part ways with my previous partners, and I was going to go on my own venture. And the venture would be more orientated around holding the leases, owning the lodges, and building a portfolio of unique destinations that are all conservation orientated. So, from day one, it was about putting in conservation efforts and making sure that we manage those fisheries for long-term reasons. The thing is that when you're running a liverboard, you generally just rock up for, say, an extended period of time, so 3-4 months. You would fly your guests in, you'd fish those destinations, and you'd pack your boat up and you'd leave. You'd leave those destinations to whoever would come by, and there's no sort of protection in place. And, it often happened where we would rock up at a destination and realize that, hey, listen, there's been other boats here, or maybe illegal fishing, or fishermen there, whatever it is, and the fishing's not so good anymore. So my whole vision changed quite substantially about in September 2012, and that's when I met my current business partner, Murray Collins, and he was already invested in Seychelles, and we decided on a path going forward, obviously as I mentioned before.
Very cool. It's you guys have definitely put the Seychelles in like the top of the destination map.
I lost you there on the first part of that. It went blank there. Just repeat that.
Oh yeah, I was saying that you guys have definitely put the Seychelles on the map as far as like the top tier destinations.
Yeah, I don't think it's us putting it on the map. I just think it's the fishing puts it on the map. I mean, if you've been out to the Seychelles and you experience the ferocity of a GT and the all the different species out there, and the sheer mass of fish, and the variety, and anything can happen at any particular given time. When you add those all together, you get an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And the thing is with Seychelles, it makes it quite easy for us, because if you've been there once, you're going to come back. Yeah. So that makes carrying seasons over and over much easier.
So most people come there for the giant trevally, or is it just most people come for just the experience of everything?
Yeah, a lot of people come for experience of everything. So I would say that a lot of people do come out to tick off species. So, and one of those species would be a giant trevally. So, often you get guests that around and say, okay, right, well, where are the GTs kind of thing. So, but once they're there, they've caught their first GT and they realize, what's available, the different kinds of species on offer, obviously then get attracted into the various different species. Yeah. The thing about the Seychelles, it's got incredible amounts of bonefish, and sometimes too much. So, a week of just pounding away at bonefish might not be everyone's cup of tea. But when you're fishing for bonefish, you have the permit in amongst them. You have the GTs coming in to eat them. You have the milkfish on the flats close by. So it is exciting.
So the GTs are coming on the flats to chase and eat the bonefish?
The GTs eat everything.
Yeah.
So they believe that they're obviously the kings or the gangsters of the flats, as we like to call them. They're obviously they're predatory, so they have a symbiotic relationship with sharks and with rays. So you have quite a cool scenario that plays out quite often, where you'll either have a giant trevally coming in to feed on a school of bonefish or mullet or whatever it is, or you'll see a GT that's swimming on the back of a shark or on the back of a ray. So there's various different scenarios, but one of the most important scenarios about catching GTs in the Seychelles is you get the opportunities on foot. So one unique opportunity is in the surf break, for instance, where you get the giant trevally coming in on the wave, surfing down, and you'll have to get ready because it comes in so quickly. You've got to make that cast, and then you get the opportunities of them when they on the white sand, and you can see him from a mile away. This blue fish coming along, and he's feeding on this beautiful white hot sand. So that's what Seychelles is synonymous with. Is fishing to these species on foot.
Yeah, that's one of the things that always attracted me, was the variety and seeing everybody with the multiple rods, fishing their 8-weight, carrying their 12-weight, just kind of being ready for anything. So
sometimes it can be a little bit tricky, where you end up with a big knot of 9-weight mixed in with a 12-weight, but it's the excitement.
A logistical nightmare. So you caught the first bumphead parrotfish on the fly, is that correct?
Yeah, so I was a part of the group of guides that worked on catching them, and I was lucky enough to have a guest who landed the first one. I wasn't the first guy to guide a guy into the first one being hooked. We hooked numerous. I mean, we don't even know who hooked the first one, because we didn't understand the dynamics of how we were hooking them, whether we were foul hooking them or whether we were hooking them in the mouth. Because often, if you had a fish on, you would either straighten the hook or bite the hook off or break the line, and quite often it would come back with a scale. So you would say, okay, well, maybe I'm just snagging the fish, they're not eating it. And only once we landed a bumphead did we realize that, yes, no, we're actually hooking them in the mouth, because they are quite spooky, so you can't get too close to them. So often the casts are quite far, so you've got no idea where he's hooked.
I guess you got to get the hook past that beak too, right?
Yeah, so for he's got a little soft spot in the sides of his mouth. So you've got you sort of cast a fly to an area where the most amount of fish will swim by, and you obviously just watch the tip of your fly line, and as it sort of moves, you come tight. And because often if they pick that fly up, they're going to bite and realize that it's not coral or crustacean, whatever it is, it's going to spit it out. So generally, you have a lot of false strikes. But rather be proactive and hook one or two than be a bit slower and not hook any.
I mean, those things get big too, right? What's the average size of those things?
Whew. No, they do get very big, but average size I would say about 30 to 40 pounds on the flats. But they get a lot bigger than that. We've seen them 100 pounds at least.
Oh, geez. So why do they have that hook on their beak? Is that for picking coral? You said something about coral?
No, they just pick coral all day. That's all they do.
And what kind of flies?
Sort of crustacean coral in amongst the weed. So if they see a crab, they're going to eat it. Those kind of things. So we use a variety of crab patterns, variety of weight. Obviously, sometimes the heavier ones are when the water's a bit deeper. But generally, you want to fish them in about 30 centimeters of water, so probably like just a bit more than a foot and a half of water. Then they're comfortable, their backs are out. You've got a good chance of them seeing the fly. And so we use combinations of tan, white, and orange, or just like a singular color or any of those. Just put it in front of them and don't move it. Just keep still and make sure that flies on the bottom, and then just wait and see if he eats it.
Man, that sounds like fun. And the triggers,
That's crazy.
It seems like most people I know that have been there multiple times, they seem to focus in on the trigger fish. I guess the variety of those, and And the fight, those are pretty hard to catch too.
Well, so the thing with the triggerfish is hooking him is the easy part. Because he's first of all he's like a set of bolt cutters with a tail. So you cast the fly in front of him, he locks onto it, and then you've got to try and get him to keep it in his mouth and then pull the hook into an area which is quite soft, which is the sides once again. So, and he's got massive teeth like a human being does. So he munches on that fly. So often you'll just get back the eye of the hook, or you'll get back a fly where the hook's flat, or there's no hook. And then once you finally hook him, you're off the mark. They're incredibly fast because they've got those adipose fins, or the top fins, which actually move in conjunction with each other. So extremely quick off the mark. Then you're obviously adding the factor that you have to fish light leader because you have to entice them because they're quite spooky. And then they really enjoy coral. So you almost have to pull as hard as you can to the extent where you're going to break him off to try and keep him away from the coral. So often you'll see, a lot of photographs or film of, when you hook a triggerfish, you'll see the guide behind the triggerfish with a net trying to get it before it jumps in the hole.
That's awesome.
But also, the thing about trigger fishing is they're so incredible to fish for because, you're fishing for them in extremely shallow water. Often their backs and tails are completely out the water with their tails waving and almost welcoming you over. And then once you get very close to them, they're extremely spooky and very hard to hook. So it's kind of addictive in a way. So once the trigger fishing bites, it really does bite.
It's kind of the same type flies, like Alphexos and little crab patterns for those guys.
No, but very similar. So we will fish a combination of Alphlexos, cracker crabs, so soft body crabs, those kind of things. They'll eat a bonefish fly, as long as it's fully dressed. It all depends on the depth of the water and what mood they're in. Some days they absolutely go crazy for orange, and other days they won't touch it. So it's all about finding the mix of what's the right fly color for them, but more importantly, obviously, the weight. You need that fly to get on the bottom. If you've got current going across the flat or a finger flat, and that fly's not on the bottom, is not going to eat it.
Yeah. So the milkfish gets a lot of attention down there too. That's seems to be extremely hard to fish for.
Oh, so the milkfish, Alphonse Island is accredited with the first milkfish ever caught in fly. That was back in the days of I think it was like 2009. It was a guy called Arne Mossier and Wayne Haslow. And between the two of them, they deciphered on how to catch these milkies and fly. And in those days, you'd catch them or see them a lot more in the channels, the narrow channels. Generally now, we see them in the narrow channels, but we generally catch more of them close to just on the drop-off of the flats. So probably like about 50 to 100 yards away from the actual flat on the ocean side. And then you get the huge amounts. And there it's the same thing. It's about targeting the most amount of fish that will pass through a single area. So you've got to get that fly to sink to the level of where the fish are feeding and try and intercept those fish coming past there. And just sort of it's a sort of a incidental eat, if it makes sense. They're just all feeding along and then they see that the fly and they eat it. And the fly we use is an algae replica. Often tied with ram's wool, like sort of a olive color or a chartreuse olive mix. And then obviously just waiting the fly to get to the right depth. And then obviously dealing with the leader. So you need to decide on what breaking straight leader you want to fish, whether you want to have less hookups and more lands or less lands and more hookups. So, once you hook them, your chance is around about 1 in 10. There's a couple of factors that come into play. Number one, they jump. Number two, they think that they are a GT at some stage in the flight. And number three, they think they're a tuna at some stage in the flight. So they'll find any kind of coral, they'll go into it. And they often sort of go down deep and just sit in the current and you can't lift them. Now, there's a rumor, well, I don't know if it's a rumor, there's a wife tale, I suppose it's not proven yet, that they don't have any lactic acid buildup, which is, they say, is the reason why they fight for so long. So if you are unlucky and you hook a 25-pounder and he's full of gas, you're going to sit for an hour fighting with fish, pulling as hard as you can. And the deeper he goes, the harder you pull. So, it's a bit of luck of the draw. Some fish, you can land in 15, 20 minutes if you get him the first time you come to the boat. I know of fish which have been over 50 pounds, which the guys have fought for 3 hours and landed in 3.5 hours. When you see a milkfish, you realize, you can see why they fight so hard. They built for speed. They got this massive fork tail and streamlined body, even like a sort of a domed eye casing which comes over. And then they've obviously got the same gill set up as a bonefish, where the gill plates fold over each other. So it allows them obviously a lot more water to pass through when they're filter feeding and when they're fighting and so forth. So they definitely are the hardest fighting fish pound for pound, without a doubt, in the ocean. There's no comparison. A tarpon of that size won't even fight 10% of the time. I would say you can compare them to a ocean-going equivalent of a bonefish. They've got the same kind of speed, the same kind of stamina, just a hell of a lot bigger.
Yeah. You say they jump? Do they jump like a tarpon, or is it more kind of like a greyhounding jump?
Yeah, they're greyhound. So you'll generally get 2 or 3 jumps out of a fish, and maybe sometimes more, but a lot of the time less. Often you'll hook a fish and you can see on the jump whether you might have snagged him or not, or whether he's in the mouth and the way he jumps. And then he's generally 1 or 2, and he's down. And then it's the fight.
Nice. What kind of rods and gear are you using for those milkfish?
10 weight. Generally 10 weight. I don't like to fish 11 weight because, obviously going to part on a light leader a lot easier. And the fly line lands a lot heavier. So, yeah. Sorry, my kids are busy killing each other.
How old are they?
My daughter's busy giving my boy a belting there.
Good. He probably deserves it.
He does deserve it.
Do they fish with you too?
Yeah, they do. I can't take them fishing at the same time, obviously. They'll kill each other, but they do fish. Pano's actually, my boy is actually taken into it quite nicely. So he's able to fish with me, and I just stand aside and watch him go about and catching them. Yeah, quite proud. The last trip we did, in 2 hours, he caught 11 bonefish in 2 hours, and I didn't even have to assist him. He tied his fly on himself. He's a 10-year-old. At that stage, he was a 9-year-old. So he tied his flies on himself. He selected the fly he wanted to fish with. I obviously had to assist him with landing the bonefish, but handling the bonefish once he'd fought it. But very proud moment for me. Yeah. My daughter, she prefers offshore fishing. She likes to windship. So when we're fishing often for the pot, for the kitchen or whatever, she likes to pull the job fish up from the deep, or she really enjoys fishing for tuna or sailfish and those kind of things. So
she sounds like she's got it figured out too.
She's the strong one.
Y'all have a lot of tuna off the coast there?
No, we do. So, the beauty about the Seychelles is that, you can catch a bonefish on the flats, and 10 minutes later you can be teasing for sailfish. Because obviously, in the Seychelles, they're all coral atolls. And they're all coral atolls. And a coral atoll is basically, millions of years ago, you have a volcano which sticks out of the water. And because the volcanic matter is heavier than the seabed, it subsides. And as it subsides into the water, obviously the coral keeps growing. And as the lip of the volcano subsides under the water, under the ocean, the coral grows up to the sun. So what you do is get all this coral growing up towards the sun. And then once the coral's on the surface, you get the deposit of sand. And then as the sand deposits more and more, the islands grow. And then obviously, floating coconuts and so forth wash up on the shore, and then they create the vegetation. And and that's how they started. So basically, because of that, you have sheer drop-offs very close to the flats. So, for instance, if you're fishing a place like a stove, you will be walking in knee-deep water, and literally 30 yards away from you, it drops to 60 meters, and with 100 yards, it drops to 1,000 meters.
Oh my God!
So it's pretty amazing. It's incredible.
So you can catch big fish in little boats, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's incredible experience.
That's awesome. And y'all are big fans of the Shilton Reels down there at Alphonse?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've been fishing Shiltons for 15 years. It's a brand which I've sort of did a lot of my pioneering with, and I've never been let down with a Shilton. So I trust them. So I think it's like you can't teach old dogs new tricks.
Right.
So I know that if I have 4 reels in my bag and I go to anywhere around the world, I have no issues with the reel. I won't have any failures.
Yeah.
The worst thing that can happen is I can get a bit of water on the cork drag. That's that, and you're never going to have a failure. So from that point of view, I love them, and yeah, it's like we like to compare them to the old Land Cruisers or Land Rovers, not Land Rovers, Land Cruisers. You know, they're gone forever. You only sort of wear them in after 100,000 miles. So now they're starting to drive. You know, so. Now, from that point of view, I love them. I've been fishing the same reels, the same Shilton reels for 15 years. I still have the exact same SL range, which is in my bag. Some of the reels are actually get loaned to guests on a daily basis. So, you know, the Shiltons have been through the testing phase where, you know, some of the reels have been fishing for 15 years. Some of the reels that I have are in the Seychelles are out in the water every single day for 8 months of the year. And they're working perfectly. And those are reels which I fished, you know, started fishing 15 years ago. So for me, you know, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Right. Yeah. And having trust in your gear like that, especially in an exotic location, is pretty huge. Knowing it's not going to break. And
you can exactly. You know, there's nothing worse than arriving on location and your reels locked up.
Yeah.
There's obviously a big debate that goes on about sealed drags and open drags, and I agree. You know, there's obviously the right kind of reel for the right place. You know, give me 1 second again. My children are killing each other again. Give me a second. Yeah, sorry, man. This is getting a bit frustrating now.
Oh, I got
my
kids.
daughter's
I know all about
it. Yeah. So where was I? Okay. So yeah. Obviously, there is a debate about closed sealed drags versus cork drags or whatever other kind of drags. And my biggest issue with a sealed drag is that sometimes I do fail when you're traveling, purely not because of the fault of the drag, purely because of when you're flying in small planes and they don't pressurize correctly. Often you get the movement of air inside that cylinder, which creates the sealed drag. And then once you get to a location, it's locked. And there's no way of unlocking it without sending it back to the manufacturer. So that's the only sort of downfall that I have with sealed drags. It happens seldom. You know, I wouldn't say it happens all the time. You know, all the other reel drags all the other reel brands have sealed drags. 99% of the time they work perfectly fine. You know, arrive on location, no issues, and so forth. And yeah, it's just, I suppose it's just personal preference. And for me, it's about not having any risk. In having a drag fail on you. The other thing is when you're on the flats, if you have an issue with a reel, you know, you should be able to take it apart with your Leatherman and fix it, which we can quite easy with a Shilton. You just take the back knob, put it in your mouth, untangle the drag knob, and pull it apart. Then do whatever you need to do and put it back together again, and it's solved. You know, it's easy to open up. You know, say for instance, if you get line trapped somewhere or you got a bit of sand inside the reel or whatever it is. So yeah, it's just that simplicity of the reel and ability to solve all problems.
Yeah, I saw some recent footage too of you using a bamboo rod. How you like those?
Yeah, so I went on a bit of a bamboo spree about 2 or 3 years ago. Actually, about 3 years ago, and it was with the Sextant TNTs. A guy called Troy who makes them. I mean, they're absolute works of art.
They are beautiful,
and they are really beautiful. And I thought, okay, well, let me go and put these up against the. Actually, the discussion started a year earlier, and I said to Troy and to Neville, the owner of TNT, I said, listen, do you think we could catch a giant trevally on a bamboo? They were like adamant that it would be no problem. So they said, okay, we'll make you one. So they said about making the bamboo rod, and I received it. And I thought, geez, this thing is amazing. I mean, if you can pull a GT on it, you can catch almost anything on it. So I went about fishing for white marlin, caught white marlin on the bamboo rod, caught sailfish, caught milkfish, permit, barracuda, obviously some big GTs, and yeah, I haven't stopped since then. So I've caught almost all the species that you can catch in the Seychelles on them, and so a couple of others. So yeah, a lot of fun. It's a bamboo rod. It's not pleasant to cast. I mean, you can't hide the fact that it's not pleasant to cast. But once you hook a fish, it's quite unique. The response in the way the fish, the way the rod responds to the fish. I suppose it's pretty close to fishing with a fiberglass rod or something along those lines. But yeah, crazy good experience, really enjoyable, and I'd still from time to time take the bamboo rods out for a whirl.
Yeah, they need a workout every now and then.
Yeah, you need to flex them.
So is Blue Safari, that's a new venture for you guys?
No, so over the years, it's about being responsible at the destinations, and obviously you need to earn a certain amount of revenue in order to be able to pay the bills at the end of the day. So we got to a stage where things are very expensive. In the Seychelles, things are extremely expensive. Fuel's expensive, and planes are expensive. All those kind of things, staffing and flying staff around and employing staff and so forth, very expensive. So we got to a stage where you don't really want to put too much pressure on the flats. So we decided, okay, instead of increasing the rods, let's rather try and earn additional revenue. And when you're walking on the flats of the Seychelles, you're out and you're going, my goodness, I don't even need to hold the rod. I'd be amazed at the amount of turtles that are swimming around me, manta rays that are swimming around me, sharks that are all around me. There's no real reason to have a rod in my hand. So on the basis of that, we set about setting up this eco-orientated business, which is called Blue Safari. And we do activities for leisure-orientated guests, or a safari-orientated guest, or diving-orientated guests, where we do a big range of activities, from flats walks, walking on the flats and showing them the turtles, the rays, the sharks, and so forth, different crustaceans, to going on the boat and showing them all the spinner dolphins, whales, manta rays, and so forth. We even get in the water with manta rays and sharks. We tease up sailfish, and then we get everyone to jump in the water with the sailfish.
Oh, cool.
There's so many different activities which we offer. And then obviously you have the snorkeling, which is incredible in the Seychelles, and then the diving. So there's all these amazing things that non-fishers can do while out in the Seychelles. And obviously showing this to everybody, and showing the couples and families that there are activities for the family, it frees up the anglers in the family to go fishing, and then have their partners or family go and do diving and all the other kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a great business. It's been rewarding in the fact that it allows us to earn more revenue and attract more people to the Seychelles. And in return, they're paying conservation-oriented levies and donations, and we're able to make a bigger difference in donating to foundations that protect our seas.
Very cool. That's awesome. The Seychelles, didn't they recently get government protection?
Yes, so they did a debt swap, and there's a large portion of the marine environment that is now protected. We're still going through the planning stages of the marine spatial planning and trying to implement these protected areas. But it's obviously, we need to take into account commercial fishing and make sure that we don't put them out too much. And then obviously we need to create a set of rules in accordance with what should happen at the different destinations. So there's obviously different levels of protection. But the good thing is that it's in progress. Yesterday I had another workshop with the government. So it's great to see. We've come a long way from 22 years ago when I started in the Seychelles. There was no protection. Any boat can rock up at any destination and they can do whatever they want. To a stage where now there's rod limits which are agreed upon. There's certain protection where boats have to get permission to go to certain atolls, and there's anchorage sites, and there's rangers on the islands, and and there's the Coast Guard that patrols the areas for illegal fishing and so forth. So it really has come along. It's taken a long time, but it really has come along. And a lot of the destinations have foundations which protect them. So there's research going on in all the different islands. And I think one of the most important things in the Seychelles is that they only allow, on the outer islands, they only allow one operator, not numerous operators. So that operator can set a set of rules for their guests, and they have to abide by those rules. And that's a big factor which has helped us protect the destinations.
That's incredible. It's awesome. You're doing so much work for that. Place deserves to be protected for sure.
Yeah, so, it does. The thing is that the Seychelles, it needs to be protected as much above water as below water, as we have obviously a lot of terrestrials. So yeah, that's the beauty about the Seychelles.
So how did you get started fly fishing? You grew up in what part of Africa?
So I grew up in the Eastern Cape. Yeah, Eastern Cape in South Africa. My family's from Zimbabwe and Scotland. So my grandfather on the one side, is Scottish and went to Rhodesia, then left Rhodesia and went to South Africa. And on the other side, my father, my grandfather, great grandfather is Scottish, but then my family came across to South Africa. And then my father went across the Rhodesian War and fought in the war and met my mother, who was Rhodesian. Then we all came back to South Africa. So it's a bit of movement around the world. My grandfather has always been a fly fisherman, or always was a fly fisherman. Grew up in Scotland, salmon fishing and trout fishing. Came across to Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, Zimbabwe now, and continued fly fishing, and obviously continued doing it his whole life until when he finally passed away about 10 years ago. He had moved to New Zealand where he was fly fishing. So he was a very integral part in my upbringing. Where I'd fish with him a lot from a fly fishing point of view. My father is a game fisherman, so he likes to fish offshore. So I did a lot of offshore fishing with him. And then I had various other friends in the area that we lived, and we'd do a lot of conventional fishing, rock and surf we call it, which is for sharks and so forth from the shore. So it is a broad spectrum of fishing. But I always knew that it was going to be fly fishing. That was my main focus and the thing that I loved. I did please my parents by doing a degree or a diploma in advertising and playing rugby during that period and so forth. But inevitably it was just to pass time, to get to the UK and to find my feet and decide how I was going to get into this game of guiding. And that's how I did it. I managed to get a visa to go to the UK. I worked for 2 years in a fishing tackle shop called Farlow's of Pall Mall. I met all the amazing people that I did, and through that managed to get a job in Russia on the Punoy River. And I spent 4 wonderful seasons there, where I ended up as the head guide.
That was your first guiding job?
That was not really my first guiding job. I was already guiding sort of ad hoc in the Seychelles, but I wouldn't say quite professional at that stage. But then, through learning some skills in Russia and at the same time guiding in the Seychelles, half the year would be in the Seychelles, half the year in Russia. I managed to pick up some skills and build my client base.
That's awesome. I was talking to Martin this morning. Martin grew up in Rhodesia as well. And I don't think he knew that about you. I was like, yeah, Keith's granddad, was read it off your bio. He worked at Troutbeck or ran Troutbeck. And Martin's
he trout beck in Yanga, so it's quite a famous trout area.
Yeah, so Martin's, when I told him that, he kind of lit up. He said, I caught my first trout there when I was 9 years old. Apparently him and some boys went and borrowed a rowboat and rowed out there and just destroyed the trout. So
it's amazing how closely knit all these trout fraternities are. So a funny thing is that my great grandfather founded a town called King Williamstown, and in the area there was a set of dams, and the dams were run by a organization or a club called FAS, Frontier Acclimatization Society, and they were responsible for all the trout which went up into Africa. So from this little town in South Africa, they would train or they would send on train by train the trout up into Rhodesia, and all the trout in Rhodesia got stocked that way. So it's funny how, I come from King Williamstown. I was born in King Williamstown, and my grandfather, obviously ended up in Troutbeck in those areas, and all the trout actually came from a lake or a dam very close to where I was born.
That's crazy. So the what's the Lesotho? Is that the trout place I'm thinking of in Africa?
Lesotho has got trout, yeah. It's also got very good stocks of yellowfish. It's a mountainous kingdom. It's got sheer cliff faces. It goes up to 1,900 meters above sea level, so very high. But it has got trout in the streams and rivers there, but also indigenous yellowfish.
Nice. So your grandfather also had a fly company, didn't he?
Yeah. So I think once he left Rhodesia and left his business behind there, like everyone did, he came to the Eastern Cape and decided, well, he needs to pass time, and he started. Sorry, no, that's not true. So when he was in Rhodesia, he had a company called Harry Stewart's Fishing Flies in the Nyangi area. He had a whole bunch of fly ties out there, and that when everyone had to leave Rhodesia, they left all of that behind, and he brought his skills obviously across into South Africa, and he didn't actually set up another factory in South Africa. He basically just tied commercially himself for almost, I think, 15 or 20 years.
Wow. Under that name, Harry Ferry?
No, sorry, I know Harry Stewart Fishing Flies.
Gotcha. Yeah, we were looking them up. You ever seen that book?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
those flies are all over that book.
Yeah. I actually don't have a copy of that book, but I've seen it a few times.
Nice.
Yeah, he's accredited to quite a few of the well-known South African flies, like the Menez Taddy and all sorts of beetle patterns and nymph patterns. So he was quite creative in his ability to create patterns that caught fish. And dare I say, he was pretty famous in South African terms, trout fishing terms. Not that there's many of us in South Africa.
That's awesome. So tigerfish, you obviously done a lot of tiger fishing as well. That's my dream fish. I think if I could do anything tomorrow, it would be go tiger fishing. What's that?
The beauty about tiger fishing is that I still believe that they're the hardest biting fish, so taking fish. So obviously tiger fishing, the water's not always clear. Sometimes you get to sight fish to tiger fish, but very rarely. Often you're fishing to structure. So you're fishing away, and the next minute you get a tiger fish eat. So I think they're unlike any other species where once they've eaten something, they decelerate. They kind of just continue to accelerate. So often when you fishing with tiger fish, it'll just be like one strip and you're broken off. He's eaten it so hard. They're so ferocious in the way they eat that sometimes you won't even get the tip of your fly line back. They've come from the wrong side to eat the fly, and they've picked up your fly line and just bit your fly line off as well.
Oh,
so the great thing about it, they're extremely ferocious and they jump a hell of a lot. And add that to the fact that they live in the most wild and pristine areas, with all these wild creatures and animals around you, crocodiles, hippos, buffalo, lion, leopard, all those kind of things. It really is a unique experience, especially when you go and you experience the Tanzanian rivers, where they are a lot smaller than the Zambezi, all those the other wider rivers you can fish for tiger fish on. They're unique, meandering, narrow rivers, and you can cast across them most of the time, and you get these big fish that are in these rivers, and it's really exciting. You can look in the bank and see a crocodile or a lion or a leopard, and 2 minutes later you hooked up to a massive tiger fish.
Yeah, I think that's 90% of it is me. It's not exactly the fish, but where you are and what you're doing. It's incredible being in that place, I think.
Yeah,
I'll do it
for me. Yeah, for me, as you progress in your life, I think catching the big fish, it is a big draw card, but I think you miss out so much. If you're able to take part in or absorb all these different destinations, what they actually have, not even worrying about the fishing, you tend to have a much better experience. If you go to a place like Seychelles and you're able to actually realize where you are, how far out of normal lives you are, how far away from civilization you are, and take in, how wild these places are. It really adds to the experience.
Yeah. I'll put links up to all your websites too. The movie you did on Golden Mossier was amazing. The scenery of that place. How was that whole experience?
Yeah, once again, I was just lucky to be invited on a trip. A good friend of mine that I've known for many years, the guy who owns Pinoy, Ilya Shervovich, he invited me on the trip. So I was just a tag along. But experiencing, those amazing rivers and these massive fish in these big rivers was an incredible experience. You know that you got one shot. When you walk up on those fish, you can make one cast and he's going to eat it, or you're going to, or he's not going to eat it, and they're going to be gone. So they're extremely spooky, in a sense that you're sometimes pulling your hair out. There's 100 fish that were just in the clear water now, and they've just disappeared into dirty water, but they're there and they won't touch the fly. Incredible place. Just experiencing Bhutan and seeing the mentality of the nation and the kindness of the people, and it's an amazing place. They measure success in happiness, not in wealth. So it's pretty amazing to see how welcoming the people are. Every single place we went to, the people would come up and greet you, and in the evenings they would come and sing songs, and we would dine with them and eat their local cuisine and so forth. So really touching experience. If I ever get to do it again, it would be beyond my wildest dreams. But just experiencing that and then catching some big fish, it just tops any experience you can ever have.
Yeah, those mountains, man, that was crazy looking place. And that, I guess they're so protected, you had to have a government official with you while y'all were fishing.
So the way that it happened is that Mossier, our royal game, you may not fish for them. It's illegal to fish them without their permission of the king. So Ilya had donated to a fund for the evacuation of children with respiratory issues. So he had donated some money to them. And in return, we were allowed to utilize the helicopters, which are actually utilized to remove any sort of medivacs or so forth from these high areas. And by getting that permission, it enabled us to fish a set of rivers which have golden moss here. So generally, you couldn't even get that permission. And then on the basis of that, obviously they were documenting whatever we caught, and then that was going back to help with all the obviously conservation or not catch stats, fish numbers and so forth. From that point of view, it's crazy experience.
Yeah, that looked great. So any travel plans coming up? Anywhere new you're going to go check out?
No real travel plans at the moment. Obviously, we're a little restricted in our ability to move, but I've had a plan to fish the Alta River. I was supposed to be fishing the Alta River actually today, which is a famous river in Norway, which is it's basically dead man's shoes. You can't get on the river, and it's just like the world famous for big Atlantic salmon. Unfortunately, it's been cancelled now 2 years in a row.
Oh no!
So I won't be going this year, but hopefully I'll be going this time next year. And I'm planning on coming out to IFTD and then hopefully heading across to Mexico and fishing for some permit afterwards. But at the moment it's a bit of lockdown for me. Just trying to sort of stem the flow of this COVID issues and making sure that our businesses are all okay and all the conservation efforts are continuing and all our staff are safe, and that we're ready to get into action again in September.
Very cool. So you are planning on coming to the IFTD this year?
Yeah, I'm going to be at IFTD if you guys will let me in the country. I know at the moment South Africans are frowned upon in all the potential things we bring with us.
We'll sneak in here. You're Canadian, right?
Yeah, I've got a British passport, but they won't let me either.
We'll sneak you in. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you talking to me today. I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Really, really good talking to you.
Yes, sir. Well, I guess we'll hang out in Salt Lake, and I'll see you then.
yeah, hopefully see you there. If I get the country, and maybe we should go fishing afterwards.
Yeah, we're looking at renting a house up there and going a little early. So if you want to go catch a few trout with us, we'll be up there.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
sounds great. I'll definitely do that.
Well, enjoy those kids today.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and see if anyone's alive.
Thanks again, Keith.
Take care, man.
See you, bud.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.